Yo, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever you're watching this, and boom, horror movies. We all know them, and a few of us really like them. I personally don't watch too many horror movies in my own time, but a while back, I found myself watching the Insidious movies, specifically the first one, the one that came out in 2011. During that first watching, I didn't think the movie was too special or too crazy or anything, but my second viewing with some new lens, I saw something really interesting. But before all that, I should give a little helping hand to those of you who've never seen the movie by giving a quick summary. Okay, so the movie follows the Lambert family who just moved into a new house looking for a fresh start. After a little bit of getting feel for the new house, their son Dalton started to explore, as kids do, and found himself in the attic. And after exploring for a bit, he immediately got knocked out. After knocking out, his parents finally took him to a bunch of different doctors, and all of them are pretty much saying the same thing that wasn't helping them in their situation at all. Bet they started to pick $1,000. Anyways, after a couple of spooky Hollywood things start happening around the house. Oh shit! The Lambert's family finally realized that things happening were not normal, and he finally got the help of an old lady named Ellis Rayner.
Elise.
And her two little henchmen, and they are paranormal investigators, come to help the Lambert family with their child. So, after some fake investigating, Elise found out that Dalton wasn't actually in a coma, but was actually using the ability of astral projection, which pretty much just means that his soul left his body and was trapped in some place called the Further, and that some demon from there was possessing Dalton. Okay then. Anyway, after that bombshell, Dalton's dad decided to learn the ability of astral projection too, so he can go save his son from the Further. So after a bit of childhood trauma and a really close encounter with the main demon that was possessing Dalton, Josh managed to save his son and get out of the Further just in time so that him and his family could have a happily ever after. Right until the sequel. Alright, sweet. Now that y'all understand the movie better, it should be a lot easier for you to understand the things that I realized after watching the movie with the new specs that I used to answer the question. How does Insidious utilize the themes of demon possession to reflect and analyze social anxieties around identity and the concept of otherness within the family structure? And to answer that question, we'll be using the literary work of Cohen's Monster Culture and Sigmund Freud's Uncanny. Let's start with Cohen's Monster Culture. In Cohen's essay, he splits it into 7 different theses. But for the main one we're going to focus on is the second one, Thesis 2, The Monster Always Escapes. In this thesis, Cohen speaks on how monsters can never be fully defeated. Even when one form of the monster is destroyed, its essence or idea will reappear in new forms. This adaptability makes monsters more or less immortal. Now, throughout this thesis, I think there's a quote that really fits the scene where Josh confronts the demon in the Further and finds Dalton chained to the floor. And that quote is, "The monster is different made flesh, come to dwell among us." I find that this quote was particularly relevant because the demon's rather disgusting physical appearance, like, come on, look at this. And its claim over Dalton highlights its embodiment of difference, something foreign, invasive, and threatening to the family bonds and identity of the family. I think this quote helps frame the demon as a manifestation of different in the family structure, complicating the idea of possession as purely external. The demon becomes a physical representation of social anxiety about otherness infiltrating the family, embodying fears of losing a child's identity to outside forces or unknown influences. Cohen's quote deepens the understanding of Insidious by showing how the demon is not merely an antagonist, but a vehicle for exploring the societal fears of difference and the weakness of identity within the family. I think that's a great way of looking at the family dynamic as a whole, but if we want to focus on one member separate from the rest, we should be using Sigmund Freud's theory of the Uncanny. In his essay, Sigmund Freud investigates the psychological phenomenon of the Uncanny, which he describes as the feeling of unease or discomfort that arises when something is both familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Kind of like coming home for a get-together at your family's childhood home, but not knowing anybody there. It's both familiar and unfamiliar. Freud argues that the uncanny occurs when something familiar reappears in an unexpected or distorted form, creating a sense of anxiety. Freud's central argument rests on the idea that the uncanny is tied to unresolved or repressed emotions from childhood, which resurface in disguised forms. A scene that illustrates Freud's uncanny theory really well is when Dalton's mom sees a gray-shaded boy in outdated clothing dancing to Tiptoes through the Tulip. The undisputed creepiest song ever. This moment's unsettling because it transforms a safe and familiar space into an eerie disturbance. I found the quote that captures the scene best. The uncanny is a class of the terrifying which leads back to something long known to us, once very familiar. The uncanny element in the scene suggests that the Lambert family anxieties is not solely external, but is rooted in a deeper emotional fracture and vulnerability within the family dynamic. In conclusion, in James Wan's Insidious, the themes of demon possession serve as a metaphorical lens in exploring social anxieties surrounding the identity and the concepts of otherness within the family structure, highlighting how repressed fears and disturbances in familial roles create fertile grounds for uncanny to emerge.